Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. They were supposed to replenish the whole earth. Instead of spreading out over the whole earth as they were commanded by God and then passed on through Noah, they congregated in Babel or Babylon. And by the way, the word Babel and Babylon are the same word. There is no difference in the Hebrew. So when you see Babel and you see Babylon, you're looking at the same word. Most people are not aware of that. The translators early in the book of Genesis often use Babel to emphasize what went on there. Because Babel means confusion, and there was a confusing of tongues. But the word Babylon and Babel in the Hebrew are in fact the same word. And there was some confusion going on. Now, I mentioned this dispensation of civil government during this period. It is in Genesis 9:6 that this is established. Whoso sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. Remember that before this time, Cain kills a man, but he is not executed for it. He is cursed by it. He is an outcast of it. The ground is cursed, so he cannot farm anymore from it. It's cursed to him anyways. But now we see a different dealing with capital punishment or with murder. So Genesis 9:6, whoso sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. So man is given the authority to execute the murderer, and this carries with it the concept of rule, authority. Who does this? Government. This is not vigilantism. This is civil government, done by law. Now, the chief person for this dispensation, of course, is Noah. He's the one who's told to do this, and he's supposed to pass this on to his descendants. And the responsibility contained in the scope of the Noahic covenant was that man must replenish and fill the earth in light of the destruction of humanity by the flood. God wanted to restore mankind to the whole planet. This is why he commanded them to do this. Now, Nimrod will come along, and he has a different idea. He is the great-grandson of Noah. Now, this is shocking. That means 3 generations later, this rebel, we'll show you why we call him a rebel, this rebel creates this world empire by conquest. I'm not sure exactly, he's called a great hunter, and normally that means he would hunt wild animals to make the empire safe, but we believe in this case he was hunting men. He would attack a city, take them on as slaves. He was hunting men to build his empire. Now, there's much that goes on outside the Bible about this and a little bit in the scriptures. We will look at both. So, here's the scriptures. Genesis 10:6. And the sons of Ham, remember Ham is the one who was cursed because he instead of covering his father's sin, he exposed it and told others about it. But he's Ham's descendant here. And the sons of Ham, Cush, and Cush begot Nimrod. He became a mighty hunter, or a mighty one. Right here it just says a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty, no, it's the next verse. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. We're going to talk about that translation there, verse 9, in a minute. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom, we're going to look at his kingdom, Babel, Erech, Akkad, Canaan, and Shinar. Okay, so let's look at where this empire was built by Nimrod. First, I have a little bit on his name here. You can actually look at it here. It can mean 2 things, rebellion or valiant. My guess is he was both. He was rebellious towards God, and he was very valiant as a rebel. That he was both. The definition of his name fit him quite well. So Nimrod means rebellion or valiant. Nimrod began to be a mighty one in the land, and you see, we've mentioned that. We consider him, the term a tyrant captures the intention of the original. Nimrod's very name is the encapsulation of his lifestyle. His name means, the complete meaning would be, let us revolt. What a name to give a child. And he fulfills it. Let us revolt. He must have been a ruthless ruler who opposed all of existing order. Now, he's noted, we saw it in the scriptures, a mighty hunter before Yahweh. One of the royal responsibilities of kings in ancient times was to keep the wild animal population thinned out to protect its citizens. It was normal to call an Assyrian king a great hunter. This is part of what the king did, but we think Nimrod went way beyond that. Here is his kingdom. And just take a look at this a little bit. There is Babylon. You notice it mentions here, Erech, he conquered here. It seems that he started in this valley, moved his way up the valley. Babylon, he captured Nineveh. Either he captured Nineveh or he built the city there. But these two great ancient cities, Babylon and Nineveh, were both part of his empire. He was not born with them. We don't know exactly what kind of warfare went on, but actually everybody would say, oh, we love Nimrod, let him take over our city. I can't imagine such a thing. He fought and killed and took slaves to build this empire. So he's the first, if you will, world tyrannical leaders. Nimrod is. And interesting, Abraham, who we're going to look at a little later today, that's where Abraham was born, in Ur of the Chaldeans. That means that the early Babylonians were Chaldeans. Abraham, the Jew, was a Chaldean, or from that group, and their languages were similar. And that's where he came from, but he was called from God out of Ur of Chaldean and away from Babylon. God had another plan for him, but there it is. And the two great rivers in that region, the Euphrates, Babylon is on the Euphrates, Nineveh is on the Tigris. Later in Jewish history, the Assyrians, their empire, the capital of their empire was Nineveh. The capital of the Babylonian Empire is right here, Babylon. And at times, you know, the warfare between the Chaldeans and the Assyrians went on through even thousands of years back and forth. So in Bible history, you're often hearing about the Assyrians, think of Nineveh, the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, Babylon. Okay, and that's where they are on a map. Now let's look at the bigger picture here. This is where we're talking about. You can't see the writing, that's Babylon. Pointing my arrow, that's Nineveh. And here is what? Israel. All right? So you get an idea where these things are happening. So Nimrod is building an empire that seems to start down here, go all the way up to Nineveh. So this region that I'm circling here was the empire established by Nimrod. Now, when they translated the Hebrew into Greek, they changed, it gives you an idea how Jewish thought was on this thing. It says, a mighty hunter against the Lord. That's what the Septuagint. So the Jews considered him a rebel. They considered his name, let us revolt, to be what he was. So this gives us an idea of Jewish understanding of the scripture, because that's how they translated it. And he started his power in Shinar and the lower Mesopotamian river valley and gradually extended. We mentioned all those cities that he extended it to, all up into Nineveh. We showed you that was on a map. So you have an idea of who he was, where he was, and that he was ruling in rebellion towards God. So just think Nimrod. Let us what? Revolt. By the way, if you have a child, don't name him then. Okay, they do enough of that. You don't need to egg them on. Okay, all right. Here we go. Let's see. Different translators, just a little here, the translator says, we shall rebel. Another says, let us revolt. We get the idea from his name in the Hebrew. Okay. See if there's anything else I want to talk about. Yes, the prophet Micah called Assyria the land of Nimrod. So he's not just a fable. We see him in Genesis. We see him again identified by Micah, the Assyrian, and that would be Nineveh. He calls it the land of Nimrod. Okay, and that's in Micah 5:6, if you want to look that up. I may have a verse here. Let's see. Now, here's where we get into legend. His wife. She's not mentioned in the scriptures, but she's mentioned in the writing of many cultures. Semiramis, the name is used today to represent different things. And if you will, and if you read different accounts of Semiramis, it's a fable, if you will. We don't have a biblical, for say, sure thing on her. We have little bits and pieces. So what different people say about her is a little different. But you get a general idea of who she was. This eventually will have an effect, believe it or not, on the Catholic Church over thousands of years. It'll go that far. We'll follow that for you a little bit. So Semiramis is the wife of Nimrod. The legend goes, and I'd say that Nimrod is killed, and she starts a story that her son was miraculously conceived and was the reincarnation of her husband. The son is killed by wild animals, and legend is that he was resurrected. She became worshipped as a deity, and her resurrected son also as a deity. So we have this mother-son gods thing going on in ancient times. It's a fake gospel. It has a resurrection story. The devil is trying to steal the truth before this truth has actually been worked out in history. So the son's name is Tammuz, and he was worshipped as an idol in Israel and throughout the Middle East. If you check a Jewish calendar, I think it's the 4th month of the year is the month of Tammuz. When the Jews went to Babylon, one of their months got renamed using his name. So you actually see the name of this false god used in the Jewish calendar to this day. There is a month of Tammuz. Don't be shocked. What's Monday mean, folks? What day is it? Moon Day? Because they used to worship the moon. Sunday? Well, they used to worship the sun. So we have pagan names we give to the days of our week, and we don't think much about it, but that's where it came from. So, let's see. Often known as the Babylonian mystery religions. And the idea is that through secret knowledge and truths, you enter into, different special states of consciousness and blessing from the gods. And they're often talked about as the Babylonian mystery religions. But Semiramis and her son were alleged her miraculous conception, who was given the name Tammuz. Means that she conceives without a husband. That's the miraculous conception. Okay? Some of you realize who've been in Catholic background, the Immaculate Conception is not the conception of Jesus. It's the conception of Mary. Mary is a renamed form of Semiramis, to what they've done with Mary. The real biblical Mary is the mother of our Lord and was a godly woman, a God-fearing Jew. But she was not more immaculately conceived without a sin nature. There's nothing in the scriptures to tell us that. But we've talked about that. She became an Immaculate Conception officially in Catholicism in 1853. That long. She was worshipped before then, but it was not official until then. So, and I know some of you think the Immaculate Conception is one of these football passes where you throw it and God catches it, but no. We have to get this right here, folks. There's some funny things with this. There's a lot of misconceptions about that. Okay. Now, my plan here is not to bash Catholicism. I had to do church history and watch me go after the Protestants just like the Catholics. I have the goods on them too. Actually, we did that a little bit last semester. But different pagan ideas crept into Catholicism and were mixed with the gospel. So the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ is in the Catholic faith. But so are some other things that don't belong there, if you will. Now, let's see. Tammuz, according to tradition, was killed by a wild animal, then restored to life. He is a satanic anticipation and counterfeit of Christ's resurrection. So we have competing gospels going on here. Now, Scriptures condemning them. You could go on and on. Jeremiah 7:18 and 44:17 through 19, 25, Ezekiel 8:14. The worship of Baal is related to the worship of Tammuz. Baal, who was the false deity that the Jews often fell into worship towards, Baal dies every year. And then you have to do things to resurrect him. So it's a death and resurrection story. And that's why it doesn't rain in Israel, because Baal is in the netherworld somewhere. You've got to do your religious thing to bring him back. But that idea, this false death and resurrection story, made up, if you will, out of nowhere, begins with Babylon, begins with Nimrod's wife, Semiramis, and her son Tammuz. Now, I mentioned how it got into Catholicism. Here's how you trace it. By the way, these notes come from the Bible Knowledge Commentary. That's where I got them from. And it's an excellent commentary. They did their homework on this thing. You remember the handwriting in the wall, the story of Babylon? Yeah. And the Chaldeans were defeated, and the Medes and the Persians took over. The Persians did not believe in the Babylonian mystery religion. They were the first dualistic religion, like the yin and the yang kind of thing. They had one of these dualistic belief systems. So the Persians discouraged this Babylonian religion. So the leaders, the priests of the Babylonian mystery religions, they moved to Pergamum, or Pergamus, which is listed as one of the 7 churches in Asia Minor. You'll see them listed, Revelation 2:12. So from Babylon, these priests go to Pergamum, or Pergamus. And they worshipped a fish god. So the priest wore a head, what you call a headpiece, that looked like a fish with his open mouth. All right, we're going to show you a picture of this in a minute. And that was to be the open mouth of the fish god. The crowns bore the words, Keeper of the Bridge, symbolic of the bridge between man and Satan. This handle was adopted by the Roman emperors, who used the Latin title Pontifex, Maximus. So the emperors called themselves the major keeper of the bridge. And the same title was later used for the Bishop of Rome. Now, let's look at some Catholic headgear. If you look at the Pope's headpiece, you see how it's open at the top? That is the fish's mouth. I don't know how to do it. And then some of them actually do have an eye on the side. All right? Now, this does not necessarily mean that the Bishop of Rome or the Pontifex, the Pope, was an idol worshiper. But his headgear came from an idolatrous religion. It was paganizing Christianity. It was, taking something from a pagan religion and throwing it into Christianity. It came first, well, the Roman emperors did it, we're going to do, who knows how they exactly got it, but that's the history of the thing. So to this day, you look at his headgear, and you study the history of it, it's kind of terrifying, actually. So, when the teachers of the Babylonian mystery religion later moved from Pergamon to Rome, they were influential in paganizing Christianity and were the source of the many so-called religious rites which have crept into ritualistic churches. That's the follow-through. That does not make everything in Catholicism wrong, but it's one pagan influence that did in fact get into the church. We know about. All right? And the worship of Mary goes back to Semiramis, who became a goddess, Tammuz, whose son by immaculate conception. It goes crazy. He's supposed to be a virgin birth and die and be raised. They're taking elements of the gospel and incorporating them into a pagan religion before the gospel's actually been revealed. So, Babylon then is a symbol of apostasy, blasphemous substitution of idol worship for the worship of God. And there's the sources for those notes, the Bible Knowledge Commentary. You might want to write that down. If you had just one commentary, I would get the Bible Knowledge Commentary. I liked it so much, I gave it to my wife for her birthday. Every woman should have it. Every guy too. Anyway, it's a good commentary. Answer a lot of your questions. And it's not all that expensive either, 2 volumes. So, let's go on here. Ancient Babylon. Anybody remember the name of this gate? We talked about this famous blue gate in Babylon. Ishtar Gate. Ishtar, the name is different, but it is the same goddess as Semiramis. So Daniel, when he's taken captive, this was on the main street of Babylon, walked through that gate when he came to Babylon. Oh, it goes way back. By the way, most of, they didn't paint that gate. They had a special kind of clay that actually, when you cooked it, it turned blue, and they actually, for show, the most famous, illustrious gate is a double gate. It's a blue gate. So, now, see if you can remember this. How many references to Babylon are in your Bible? Remember? Give me a guess.
137.
I see 2 from Bob. Is that 2 times 10 or 2 times 2,000? Times 100? Anybody? Come on, let's give me a number. See if someone remembers this from last semester. How many references to Babylon?
There you go.
365, 144. You're right in the middle. We got the answer. What do you got there, Mark? 280. He's closest tonight. Here we go. About 265 references to Babylon. From Genesis to Revelation. So, we mentioned that because of this, we believe to fulfill the prophecies in the book of Revelation, that Babylon will be rebuilt. It's ruins right now, but it will be rebuilt at some point. So we see this thing in Genesis, and there's nothing new under the sun. Babylon, Babylon, the source of false religion. And a false resurrection story. Well, the Antichrist has his own resurrection story in the book of Revelation. He receives a mortal wound and is healed. And he'll probably, best we can see, he'll set up his capital in Babylon, where the first false religion began. So nothing new under the sun at all. Okay, I'm going to skip some of this now. Here's what, let's see. Okay. Micah 5:6. Remember I mentioned this? And they shall rule and waste the land of Assyria with the sword, and the land of Nimrod within her gates. This is Nimrod associated with the Assyrian Empire. And by the way, when the Assyrians were ruling, the Assyrians controlled Babylon. Later on, Babylon will conquer the Assyrians. So, when he says Assyria, it includes Babylon here. Let's see. So, and back in our book here, Genesis 11:4. And they said, go to, let us build a city and tower whose top may reach unto heaven. Let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. This is what it says about the Tower of Babel. And if you will, and here's the actual, my notes on this thing. Translation of the Hebrew word in Genesis 10:10 and 11:9. Elsewhere, it's translated Babylonia or Babylon. The rendering Babel in the Genesis sages, is intended to relate to the name of the early cultural setting reflected in Genesis 11:1-9, especially the attempt to build a tower. The translation Babel is also intended to associate the Tower of Babel incident with a popular understanding. Babel is derived from a root meaning to confuse. So Babylon, confusion, or to confuse, Babel, to confuse. That's what we have about it there. And I have it here. Let me go on a little bit. Babel was known for its tower, which was to ascend to heaven. It typifies all false religions, because they all have a system of human works to get to what? To heaven. We're going to build the tower to heaven. We're going to work our way to heaven. Okay, and obviously it's such a silly thing, but the good works crew, that I'm going to be good enough to go to heaven. False religions each have their own system of works to get one to heaven, or to please God or the gods, but they all erect a tower or standard that one must attain to. So it typifies a religion of works, of good works, of religious works to please God. We're going to look at how that's refuted in scriptures. We've looked at this. Let's see. Wife Semiramis. When Nimrod was killed, Semiramis fled, spread the rumors that he had ascended to heaven, where he had become one with the sun. There's a lot of... when Semiramis later gave birth to son Tammuz, she claimed he was a reincarnation of her deified husband. He had returned to save the human race. This is a legend of Semiramis. Do I have any more on it here? Nimrod's wife Semiramis, by miraculous conception, bore a son Tammuz, who was killed by wild beasts, yet was resurrected. Yeah, I mentioned all those things. You see it? Somebody created this work of art because they believe this thing. She's later deified as the mother of the sun god, and it was supposed she had ascended into heaven. Some of you know the Catholics celebrate the ascension of who? Mary. This is not new. This is not Catholicism. This is ancient false religion going back to the Tower of Babel. It's as old as time, if you will. In the various cultures throughout history around the world, the same basic deities have been worshipped under different names. The names change, the basic belief system or false belief system is the same. Now, because this is what they do, in Babylonia, the Mount Tammuz was established in honor of the god Tammuz. Beginning with the summer solstice, that's the first day of summer, came a time of mourning in ancient Near East. The Babylonians marked the decline in daylight hours and the onset of the killing summer heat and drought with a 6-day funeral for the god. Recent discoveries reconfirm him as an annual life, death, rebirth deity. He dies every year, and this is the story of Baal. And you've got to do your religious thing, including animal sacrifice, temple prostitution, sometimes child sacrifice, to please and to bring this God back from the dead. So he's not an all-powerful God. He dies every year. It's a strange thing, but they associate it with the weather. And here it is in the scriptures, and I'll end with this one on Nimrod and his wife Semiramis and Tammuz. This is Ezekiel. He's talking about what's going on at the temple. Then he brought me to the door of the gate of the Lord's house, which is towards the north. And behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. These are Jews. This religion, this false religion, from Babel, from Nimrod, from Semiramis, is affecting the Jews hundreds, even thousands of years later. Then said he unto me, Hast thou seen this, O son of man? Turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations than these. I'm going to look at the next abomination going on. So there are women meeting at the temple to mourn who? Tammuz, Jews. This is the effect it's had on them. Ezekiel 8:16, and he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house, and behold, at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men, 25 men, with their backs towards the temple of the Lord, their faces towards the east, and they worshiped the sun towards the east. They're worshiping Tammuz. Well, in this case, I got that wrong. They're worshiping Nimrod. Nimrod was supposed to become the sun god. This is the ancient fables. So these are ancient fables. You see them in different cultures and outside the Bible, But they're identified here in the scriptures too. This was going on. God speaks of the idolatry. So the religion of Babylon had affected the Jews. How many we do not know.